We're here with Brett Blanden, otherwise known as
Scoop.
Scoop. I have always known you as Brett. They know you as Scoop. What's the story? Where's
Yes.
Scoop?
What's the scoop? Scoop.
What's the Scoop? Scoop.
So I guess I got nicknamed Scoop back in my first year of being on the road. I was working for a Sony artist named Brad Martin, the tour manager / bus driver for the show one night at Midnight Rodeo in Austin, Texas. We're heading from Austin to San Antonio, and the tour manager / bus driver didn't make it to bus call without going into that story. And manager called and said, "Hey, can you tour manage this thing to San Antonio and get it home?" And I was like, yeah, I can do it. And so I went in the next morning. We got to San Antonio and met everybody I needed to do, made a day sheet, and got back out to the bus. And about the time I get out to the bus, the band had been up kind of rocking all night long before, and the girl that owned the bus company opened the bus door, swinging an empty bottle of Crown Royal, and said, "What's the scoop, Scoop?" And at that point, I became
Ever since
Scoop.
then, it was.
So the touring folks know me as Scoop, and the folks that I dealt with in the studio environment before being on the road still call me Brett often. So my girlfriend's like, "I'm just going to call you Brett." I'm like, "That's cool," because I think Scoop would be a little bit weird at home.
Well, you mentioned before, because I'm sure you didn't just show up here one day and start running sound. So what transitioned you to this point right now?
So I had a small studio on Music Row called Brett's Place, and we did jingles and demos and things like that. And the house band that was at Brett's Place they're all road guys now. But at the time, they were all kind of going, "Oh, well, maybe we should go on the road because there's not a lot of work in Nashville." So I ran into the guitar player one night in a bar in Nashville, and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I'm working right now." He's like, "Well, can you do live sound?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "Well, I'm going on the road with this Sony artist. They're gonna do sound guy auditions tomorrow. You should come audition." I was like, "Okay." So I did, got the gig, and I learned really quick that I had a lot to learn in the live sound department versus the studio sound department. And anyway, there was a bunch of guys that really influenced me and helped me learn sometimes hard and fast lessons, were really influential in growing me over the time. And I still do a fair amount of studio stuff and more obviously live sound.
Yeah.
So,
what was the biggest thing to learn going from studio to live sound? Because I know in studio it's all isolated. If there's a wrong take, you can do it again and do it again. You can create cool environments. With this, you've kind of got one shot and do it well. If not, then well, there's the next road. So was it a hard transition for you? What was your biggest hurdle, I say, to?
well, maybe I'm not going to say it was a hurdle, but things that I kind of learned that were different from the way that I had learned about studio engineering. Probably the first thing I learned was about faders at Unity in live sound. If you look at most of my desk, the faders at Unity are pretty close. In the studio, it had less to do with that because you were adjusting a head amp value and you weren't really looking at fader levels as a Unity option. So that was an adjustment, kind of learning that. Cam Beachley, when I was mixing Brad Martin on Sony, it was my first road gig, and Cam was mixing Lone Star, and we were in Ogden, Utah. I tell this story all the time. And Cam, I didn't know him, and he's this huge, like really tough-looking, just hard-looking guy. And he didn't say a word to me at all. And when I came out of the chute, hot, and my faders were all over the place. And he's on this big Midas Heritage H3000, and I don't even remember what I was on. Probably at LS9, or no, it was an analog desk, some little crappy analog desk, I'm sure. And he just goes like this, and he looks at my desk and he looks at his desk, and all his faders are in line. I'm like, and then he just walks away, and I'm like, wow, okay, I've got some stuff to learn here. And then I think that Sal Greco made a great point. He used to be the chief tech engineer at Ocean Way, and I told him that I was going on the road, and he kind of had a chuckle, and he's like, "Just remember, frequencies are notes." And I was like, yeah, I knew that, but I never really thought about it like voiced like that.
Yeah.
So I think those two things kind of really stuck with me.
What a great nugget.
Yeah, it's a good nugget.
It is.
Frequencies are notes.
Could be a great t-shirt.
It is. It would be a great t-shirt. I think those are probably two big considerations on the front end. You do only have one shot to get it right, but honestly, I think there's charm in there.
Yeah.
You know, if I've
Yeah.
got 15 minutes to tune a PA, it's probably going to be a better day than if I have an hour. You know, don't overthink this.
Yeah.
Kurt Jenkins, that's a good Kurt Jenkins quote. Don't overthink this.
What's the
Yeah.
KISS acronym?
That's it. That's right. That's right. That's right.
So Lady A, what got you to? You've been with them since the whole entire time I've known you.
Yes,
So how'd you get to that point? I don't think
2009.
I've heard this story.
So, you know, after various artists in the industry doing front of house monitors, I worked. I went out with Ty Herndon to do a country festival in Greece for like 10 days. And when I came back, I was on the plane and I made a. That's cool because I don't think I've ever told this story on camera. I was keeping a journal. I still have this page where I wrote it. And I was on the plane and I had good wine and good food and made all these really cool new friends in Greece. People I still communicate with today, really spiritual, light-hearted bunch of people. And on the plane on the way home, I said, you know what? I'm making a personal commitment to myself that from this point forward, I don't have to work for anybody that I don't like what they're saying or how they're saying it or like them as human beings. And if that's the case and I'm making this commitment to myself, then who do I want to work for? And just a little bit of setup before this time, I had been mixing Shadazy for a while. And Shadazy did a gig at Joe's Bar in Chicago as the headliner. And the opening act, and I think it was 2009, was Lady Antebellum at the time.
Yep.
And there were some nice kids that had an RV and they were, you know, working on a deal and nothing was done yet, but they were super nice and the harmonies were great and they were great folks and they put on a great show. And I don't go out and watch like the opening act as often as I should. But man, I really had a great time with them. And I had gotten Charles's number when we were on that gig to see if they needed any help downstream. Really liked them. So back to the plane. I'm on the plane. I'd make this personal commitment. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to those Lady Antebellum folks and see what they're doing. And I also really wanted to mix Daryl Singletary. I think that he is like one of the best country voices ever. And his career had already kind of had its big peak.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, I've got some time to burn before another gig. You know, let me look into that. You know, that's where I'm going to start. So we land in Nashville, and at the time, I had been supplying kind of sound guys, road sound guys, for venues in town that had sound systems that we'd go in and tune them, and then we'd staff them with guys that knew what they were doing. So the systems were getting blown up. The tuning was doing a good job. They had clients and repeat performers that were coming back. And the guy that was supposed to be doing one of these club gigs that night, engineer, I land, I get to baggage claim, and my phone rings, and he's like, hey, my van won't start. I'm not going to be able to make this gig for load in. And I was like, you know what, man, I'm just going to get my suitcases, and I'll go over to the club, and I'll take care of it tonight. And I'll take care of it. And I've been gone for 10 days. And so I go over to the club down in Midtown, and I walk in, and that night, the band was Big and Rich, the Music Mafia guys, and the guest artist that Big and Rich and Music Mafia had singing with them that night was Daryl Singletary. And Charles Kelly from Lady A was at the bar. And so that night, I was like, Charles, you know, I'd really like to do something. He's like, we just got a deal. All this cool stuff. Daryl was like, yeah, I'm doing this Honky Tonk Tailgate tour party. I need somebody, and so does Rhett Akins, Thomas Rhett's dad. So I went out and mixed some shows with Rhett Akins and quite a few shows with Daryl Singletary, rest his soul. And I met about a month later with Chris Ferrari, our old tour manager from Shadazy, and he's like, yeah, I'm going out with a new act. I was like, yeah, I think I might be too. And it was both Lady A. So we got back together, and that was all super right on time. And I've been with them ever since. I get asked a lot. So do you think that that you willed that into existence? I can't tell you that I might not have thrown energy at wanting it to happen, and I think there's value in that. But kind of the way that I think about it more often is like a sailboat, and like, you know, put up your sails and take your sails to the right level that's of good, positive, loving energy, and they will catch that wind and move you forward. almost like a carrier wave, if you want to think RF. So I really think that I had the best heart intentions in my sail at that level, and it was ready to catch this channel of energy that was resonant with things good. I even now it's 2023, and it's the best family that I could choose, and I'm not sure I chose it if it was chosen for me or if I was just resonant with the good carrier wave that was going on. Yeah.
Something that's been said to me is the luck favors the prepared.
Yeah.
So I could see how all that lined into that one.
Yeah.
But we are sitting in front of a beautiful console.
Thanks.
It is the DLive S7000. Did you start off with the DLive? What'd you start off with?
No, I've been through. So with Lady A, we've really kind of been, grown with them over all of their budgets. So I guess in the history of Lady A, when I started with them, we were kind of profiling in the beginning, and then they had a huge hit, and I dropped right into a Studer Vista 5 and carried a Vista 5 in 2010, and then carried that for a bit, missed some of the THD functions, like missed being able to put my foot in it, get some color out of it. So I made the move to an SD5 at that point with Waves as a bolt-on. That definitely had a couple issues between Waves and Digico at that time. And I was disappointed at that time in the Digico technology, because the places I had hoped to find some THD weren't really good sounding THD. So I ended up leaning more on the Waves. Left that and went to an S6L for a while, also with Waves integration. Then I went to go move over to a PM7, which I really was excited about in 1920, which became pandemic, and that went away. And then re-entering the touring scene after everybody's budgets and everybody was out of money, it became a budget-conscious consideration, not decision. I'm not here because of a budget constraint so much as I could do everything under the hood that I need to do here in a price point that works great for our accountants. Yeah. And so I've been on this desk now, the Allen Heath DLive stuff, S7000 series, for 3 years. I guess at the end of the second year, I hopped over to the 5000 size frame instead of the 7000. I like working with my aux return buckets on my left. So,
was there any other ones that you were looking at, or was this kind of what you had in mind and went straight for that, and you just kind of knew and locked it in?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of stuff in the price range that could do the stuff that I wanted to do, and honestly, I've been really happy with it. I haven't had any technical hiccups with it. Allen Heath's service has been great. Bangs has been great. Mike Bangs over there. The EQ sounds great. The onboard compression sounds great. I'll be honest and tell you, I don't use any of the onboard reverbs, but I am using some of the delays, and I think if I had to do it all in the box, I could. But I've got an outboard Bricasti that I'm using for vocal
reverb. So walk us through the whole thing, what you all got.
So this is the DLive S7000. I am not on the latest firmware, just because this console build that I've been using, I've kind of continued to migrate it. And anyway, I've heard that some of the new dynamic stuff that exists in the DLive is really great. I'm not using any dynamic EQ in the console at all at this point. Basically, all of the inputs come in from stage 2, a stage 64. There's an additional DX rack in that because we do have 96 inputs available. We're using about 86 for this year's touring shows. And then all of that rides Giga Ace up here to the console, where in the back of this rack, well, actually in the front of this rack, there's a DX32 rack as well here, so that all of the stuff that's going on in this rack can get in and out of the network here and up there if I need it to, and it gives me some extra I/O, AES, and analog here. So that goes into the DX inputs on the rack. I'm running Wave Super Rack sound grid, and on this Mac Mini here, and the other Mac Mini is doing Waves Tracks Live with the Waves QREC interface, if you will. Basically, SoundGrid QREC is a 1-to-1 patch bay, 128 channels deep, and it includes the Waves driver, so there's a lot less things you got to open up in order. In the back of the S7000, there's a pair of Waves cards. One strictly is connected to Super Rack SoundGrid for processing effects, things like that, which I don't use a lot of. And the other card is just for virtual playback and record. Could I have fit all of that into one card? Yes, but I like from my studio side, likes the organizational system of being able to have the two cards in the desk.
I see Bricasti in there.
Yep, Bricasti M7 for vocal reverb only. There's a TC Electronics Finalizer 96K next in the rack. It is only used as a broadcast minimal mastering output. So basically the desk, I have a matrix send to the finalizer and then a return to the desk that goes into my record for Pro Tools, or for Tracks Live, so I can spit it out. It also returns to a set of record outputs that can go to broadcast or whatever with a broadcast matrix mix set up for that. Then there's a Denon 2-track recorder this is SD and USB. I use it as a USB recorder. That show gets recorded every night and goes to the video guy, so that he can feather that in with his camera audio every night to service socials. The pair of LM44s is all obviously drive, and the way that this rig is currently set up as a LCR, so left, center, right, sub, front fill delays are my outputs, and there's AES fallover, or analog fallover from AES. Today we're using analog outputs and not AES. Back to Waves, there's a pair of SoundGrid servers. One is online and in use, and one's a fallover. I think that's kind of it on the front end of the rig. Squawk box, Clearcom. These are just, I don't usually carry near fields out, but we've been in a fair amount of theaters lately where there are no speakers that hit my face. So just having something to reference a little bit of top end in the back, they travel well, they're inexpensive, and we're a JBL product, so go Harman. Yeah. Okay.
How do you approach sound check? Virtual sound check. You do have Smart here. How much does that play a key into your sound check process?
So obviously Smart from a systems timing involvement. Today the guys here local are doing all of that time alignment, and I'm not doing anything short of double checking that. Smart for me is integral because I have Smart as an overlay, I have it in my Lakes as well that I can overlay, and I can look at my Lake EQ over my Smart RTA. I am a user of the spectrograph a lot. I like that because I can see it over time. And so if I'm not looking at something or can't look at something, then I'll pop over and check that out. Usually I'll tune everything to pink noise first, and I look at what's it really doing. I have an overlay in Smart overlay in the Lake called Smart. So I'll do my primary tuning in that overlay relative to pink noise. And then my next overlay in Smart I call it ear. And it's like, how does it sound to me? So I'll pull up music, I'll pull up virtual sound check, I'll listen to some of those things over that, and I'll make some personal choices in there. My third overlay is called sound check. And at that point, if I've got to make any changes for the band, if my mood changes, if something goes wrong at home, whatever, I do it in that third overlay. And then the fourth overlay is reserved for ringing. Like today we've got an 8-foot runway, but so I won't likely use that overlay at all. On a day that I've got a 40-foot runway and I might have to ring a couple things tighter or find a couple specific items, I'll put that in the fourth overlay. And that way I've kind of got a roadmap to what choices I made given what intel. The computer told me to do this. Okay, well, it's in the Smart thing. My ear told me to do this. Well, okay, well, subjectively, I might be wrong later. Or humidity or temperature outside changed or whatever. Or, you know what, this was a critical mission item with a female vocal mic that I have 24 dB of dynamic range on, and I need to leave that filter in place after the fact because that's a runway item.
When I talk to new engineers, and honestly I speak to myself with this a little bit too, is that with all this digital age, sometimes you forget to not mix with your eyes and actually listen and mix with your ears. So it's really cool to see that process of even you adding the ear section for that to be able to reference that. That's really cool to see. Waves. Everybody loves waves. You got some favorite plugins?
Everybody loves waves. That should be a t-shirt.
It should. Everybody does love waves. When it works and if it crashes, then I see you have some waves out, waves in stuff here, but let's talk about the, you got some favorite plugins that you use? You got a little bit of secret sauce in there so that you could tell us that you...
I'm really kind of a minimalist compared to a lot of especially the younger generation that I know. I still, just kind of backing up before we get into waves, I do not mix in groups.
Okay.
I do have DCAs, DCA groups, but I mix everything to a stereo bus, just kind of like it was a studio machine. And I find that over my history as an engineer, I have tried playing with groups and things, sometimes with very good success, and then sometimes with lots of hair loss. And so I definitely mix better on a stereo bus environment, and I'll share some of the tips and tricks that I do in that, or some of my considerations really with that. So from a outboard processing, we'll call waves and outboard processing, I don't do a lot of stuff. I can walk you through my waves. I don't know if you can really see it or whatever, but just to comment on a couple things. I have a whole bunch of drum channels open up in waves that have nothing on them, that are just there for time management. I do a SSL channel strip on the two kick channels and the 2 snare channels, and that's it. The band, this is all of my band inputs. Some of these inputs we're not even using on this tour, but basically they're things that need some type of surgical item, a mando or a banjo. Dave's keys have a dynamic EQ on them for his piano part thing. But that's pretty much the extent of everything I'm doing on the band, and it's a couple EQs and an F6 and a C6. Like, there's nothing really to it. Vocals, this is a vocal page, and something that I do like about the Waves integration with the S7000 is on this channel, and I'm not sure that you guys can see this, but I have basically 2 Super Rack Sound Grid channels per RF microphone. So we have 8 RF microphones that are deployed in this tour, and each of those 8 RF microphones has a channel strip, so EQ, compression, de-esser, whatever is going to happen all the time on that channel. And then the second channel is an instance of WaveTune real time. So it's the tuner. We don't really use tuners much, but it's in there if I want to put it in a snapshot or I want to put it in as an insert. And the reason they're on 2 different channel strips are because on the 7000, on the D-Live series, there's an insert A and there's an insert B. So insert A is on all the time and catches the channel strip, and then insert B is the tuner. So if I do have tuners in and they choose to do the song in a different key, or they're going to do a medley and I'm going to stay in the same snapshot, I've got a T out button over here, and that basically reconnects insert B send and return. So insert B goes away, and that means the tuners go away too. So it's basically tuners are in, tuners are out, and it's a good bailout button for that. Then up in the top side of my desk, I've got all these hotkeys that are up here, solo in place, obviously. But waves in, which is kind of the default, so all these things are in. And if I press wave out, it mends all of the insert points where waves is playing. So if waves did eat it, I still have a show without that. And the way that I run gain staging is they play, I can pull it in and out, and I get flavors and colors, but I'm not doing big gain staging considerations there. Wave on wave is a reference to a Pat Green song, and the button does nothing, but I thought it was appropriate because wave in, wave out, wave on, wave. Thought it was cool. Love you, Pat Green. The rest of the stuff, these are all encoders so that I can change my desk encoder to reference my vocal verb, my instrument reverb I call kit. Scooper, we can get into that if you want to know about that. It's a doubler, vocal doubler. Short delay, long delay, and solo, which is a guitar verb for solos kind of thing. There's a couple more effects under the hood, but that's pretty much my standard fare studio and live kind of ballpark for effects usage. Outside of that, the other stuff that I'm doing in Waves, I've got a stereo bus channel. So all I'm doing, this is a little bit of compression EQ, and then SSL G bus compressor, and that's it for my stereo bus. This page in here, and once again, you guys might not be able to see this, but in my mains page, the rest of this routing is just drive stuff for time management. I also have my vocals from my vocal page, primary vocal channels landed here as well in case I needed to access something quick. But it's pretty minimal in the, and my instrument reverb, kit verb that I say is a Waves product. It is our verb, and it lives in Waves as well. So I have a backup in the desk, so if I have to go to wave out, it brings in, or it puts me into a plate that's under the hood on the desk. So it's another fail-safe and fall-over opportunity. So that's pretty much it for Waves. Of note, something that people using this desk might be interested in know, there's no Midi port on the DLive stuff. It works on IP Midi. So if you're wanting to control anything with Midi outside of the box, you've got to go that route. The Bricasti has Midi in, but it only speaks hexadecimal. So I've got my user banks on the Bricasti stored as hexadecimal values, and in my scenes and snapshots, I've got in the custom Midi window for each snapshot, I've got a hexadecimal value that fires out hex via IP Midi to a bone box. I endorse this product. I mean, they're not giving me one, but it works great with the desk, and many other IP Midi items don't. So that's how I'm getting Midi into the Bricasti, is through a bone box. Did figure this out this last year on a European tour. If you don't have a bone box, or you have a IP Midi box that's not working very well, and you're using Super Rack, you can come out USB Midi, USB to Midi, like a $9 cable instead of a $250 box. You can, when you fire snapshots of the desk and you're changing snapshots in Super Rack, you can have those Super Rack snapshots fire USB Midi to any external device that you want. You can build that into Super Rack as an item, save you some money. It adds one more point of failure, in my opinion, and not something that I want to do unless I have to, but it is an option. It does work. I've done it. And it gives you the ability to steer around some networking stuff that, pending which IP Midi box you have, might be really difficult to interface with.
Do you have any common issues on the road that you wish wasn't really a consistent headache for you?
Yeah, I think that my most common...
That you'd be willing to share?
Let's talk about this year. So this year, Lady A is doing a long overdue theater tour. So 3,500 to 7,000 seat theaters. We're not carrying PA this year. It is PA du jour. And most of it is installs, right?
Yeah.
I think that probably my biggest consideration on a daily basis on the road this year is the big money seats down front. There is significant deficiency in at least HF pattern coverage in that downstage triangle, if you will, often. I'm not saying always. Some people have really done it well, but our theater shows will have, everybody will stand up. And once they stand up, the 4-foot high front fills that work fine for theater events typically are
blocked,
worthless.
Yeah.
And so I, as a general rule, deploy in situations where the pattern coverage of the main hangs does not cover that area adequately, and front fills are pretty much worthless at that point. I will often engage a set of, you know, mid fills, if you will, to cover that area. We're not carrying any with us this year, but in 2009, 2010, when we did theaters, a theater run last, we carried adjustable lens box. It was an Outline butterfly, or mini compass. It was a mini compass box by Outline, and we could stack a couple of them up like a mini line array, and the bottom boxes would be deads, but we could get air to really surgically deploy HF pattern that was timed obviously with the mains and really get good coverage in that front area. I think that's a pretty big consideration for production managers to have, dialogues for front of house engineers to have with their production managers, not only in questions to ask about existing deployments of PA, but hey, should we have a couple Swiss Army knife type pieces of product on the truck to be able to take care of those issues when the existing install or deployment is ineffective there. Yeah, that's probably been my day-to-day biggest issue.
You know, you and I talked quite a bit through COVID, and I noticed there was a change in the industry to where a lot of the old timers kind of hung up their hats, and there was a moment where I think you could probably agree, I was a little nervous to see if is it going to come back in full scale. I've seen that the new trend has been there's a lot of young guns out there doing it. Sitting from where you're at right now, what advice would you give to them or to yourself when you're first starting off to be, if they want to sit in this seat one day and they want to do this, they want to get out touring, what advice would you give to these young guns that are wanting to get out there and really charge after it?
Wow, so much stuff. The first thing I would say, if a kid approached me and said, hey, you know, I want to come do what you're doing. I want to be a front of house engineer. I want to be a monitor engineer, which I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that. My first comment to them is this what you love to do? Like, is it what you wake up wanting to do every day? Do you want to do it 24 hours a day? Do you want to go out and get club gigs? Do you want to work in the shop? Do you want to solder cable? Do you want to listen to mixes? Do you want to research? Do you want to watch channels like this? Do you want to learn and grow and constantly improve your craft? And like, is it what you love to do? Because if it's not, I'm not going to discourage you from doing what you want to do, but maybe you should have a secondary major in IT. The reason I say that is because there are people that this is all we love to do this. Yeah. Like, I love to water ski. I love to do other stuff too. But I do this all the time. When I'm home and I have time off, I play with audio stuff. I watch tutorials. I learn. I talk to my friends. I educate. I am educated. If you don't want to be immersed in it, and that's not what your soul wants to do, somebody is going to pass you up and pass you in the development of that. And I don't want you to have to work harder than you should, but if you love it, you'll work as hard as you're allowed to, and it won't feel so much like work. Oh, I'm gonna pull a feeder out at the end of the night. I'm pulling 300 feet of hose in the mud in the rain. Cool, I didn't have to go to the gym today. Like, if that's the mindset versus, man, I can't wait to get home to do this, or, you know, like, if it's not your passion, if it's not what you love, be mindful of that and go, you know, is this really what basket I want to put all of my eggs in? Secondly, I would say, I dated a gal that used to put a Post-it note on the refrigerator that said, listen better. I'm like, I'm a sound guy. All I do is listen. I probably wasn't a very good listener, and that would be a forthcoming encouragement.
Was that note for you or for her?
For me, for sure. For sure. I would say listen better. Listen to the guys that have done it for a long time. Don't listen to the guys that are telling you, you know, don't do it the way that I did it. Like, that's not the idea. But I do it a way that is my way, and it's not the right way or the wrong way, but it's the way that works for me. And just this last year, especially coming out of the pandemic, I really had a personal charge to go around to other engineers that I look up to, and my peers and compadres and guys that call me for work and I call for work. And you know what? Can I come sit in on your rehearsals for a couple days and like just walk me through what you're doing? Talk to me about things that you're up against, how you deployed technology to work for you. David Loy, I went and sat with him for a couple of days. He mixes Kane Brown, and David's doing so much cool stuff. His workflow is totally different than mine. But man, I got a couple little greasy nuggets to use. Stay connected. This is not a competition. It's not about who's better than the next guy. It's a community, and embracing things as a community, as a unified opportunity for us all to resonate, brings more power to that whole front.
So I know that you are someone who is very plugged into the community, and you're very up to date on current events and what's coming on, specifically with technology. What do you see as the future? What's the future, and especially with the AI stuff? Do you think we're going to get replaced eventually? And there's also the talks with Atmos and maybe flying some speakers around and bringing 300 trucks to do everything. So what's your opinion on what's the future for us?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because I don't think I've talked about this in public. And look, I don't do well in Vegas. If I had to guess,
Okay.
Especially coming out of pandemic, and I think you and I have talked about some of this at some point, it's becoming more and more expensive to do everything. Are we adapting and evolving, and should this be a consideration of change that is inevitable, right? Or are we going to continue to try to mitigate that evolution or that change from happening? And I kind of got to go back to business managers and go, they're like, no, it's got to continue to go the other way, but it's going this way and we have to fight it. I think that I think we're growing a generation that is immersive. We're growing an AirPod generation. We're growing a video gaming interactive generation. We're growing a generation that is less socially interactive than the generation that I come from, for good or bad, zero judgment, but it's an awareness. Looking well downrange, how does that population want to engage events like this, or do they? My kind of take on it is, I think that immersive touring, something from an immersive deployment standpoint, PAs in the air, multiple hangs, time that it takes, trucks, fuel is like the most expensive touring commodity right now. Amount of having enough trucks to pull that much PA, boxes, costs, accountants. I know some people have toured immersive stuff and done well. From my place in the industry, it feels like immersive touring from a many transducers flown environment is cost prohibitive, at least for me and my artist at this time. Well, if I extrapolate that far down range to the AirPod generation, well, now everybody brings their own transducers. And, oh, hey, transducers, there's GPS technology in them and data to sell. Well, some accountant's going, show me the money. Okay, so if you encourage that, or if we're getting a generation that wants to, 15 years from now, land at an immersive show because they've grown up in an immersive environment, and there's bolt-on money for data, mining and GPS location data and all that stuff per fan, and all of the items that come with that, I can't tell you that I don't think that that's a reasonable consideration of a future of items. Do I think there's still going to be subs on the ground? Yes. Do I think that there's going to be a PA in the air? I don't know. It's a consideration.
Do you think gone are the days of audiophiles? Do you think they just don't care much more? They just don't care how it sounds. They just want to share it with their friends?
I don't know. If you'd asked somebody 10 years ago about gone are vinyl the days of gone, they would have said, I'm going to buy all the expensive stuff now because it's cheap. You just watch. I don't really care to roll the dice on that. I do think that it's healthy to consider the future demographic of digesting audience members. I think it's also healthy to look outside the box, kind of pun intended, and go, what are the parts of the concert experience that are really going to be connected? A couple of years ago, I got a bunch of the post audio engineers together in Nashville that I'm friends with, and we got together for margaritas one night. And the idea, this was well before pandemic, the idea was, let's talk about the virtual concert ticket because we think it's coming. Like, what's that going to look like, act like, smell like? Are we going to be sending trucks? Like, are we going to be doing remote things? We were talking about all of this well before pandemic. And one of the engineers brought his niece out and basically said, and she was 16, and we're talking about all this and audio standards and this and how are people going to interact and avatars and blah, blah, blah. And about 2 hours in the conversation, one of the engineers says, so let's ask her what she thinks. And she says, you're doing it wrong. And we all got out our pencils and our notepads. We're like, what do you mean? She's like, I go to virtual concerts occasionally, and I just want the ability for my experience to be able to outdo my friends. Now, does that make that person less of an audiophile or not? Who's to say? But it requests that we lens out and we look at the bigger picture of all of the things that are going on, not our channel in audio alone. Who is the digestible audience? What are they looking for? How are they looking to ingest it? How are they programmed? I'm not saying that transducers flown in the air shouldn't continue on forever. I'm just saying we just need to be considerate of that downstream and think, like I said, outside the box. Yeah.
Thank you for your time, man. Really,
man.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for having
if people
me.
want to follow you, are you where can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, you can follow me on Brett's Place Productions on Insta. I am also on Facebook, and you can just search Brett Scoop Blanden, and I'll pop up. I love DMs. Don't send me links because I don't click them. But I love feedback locally, globally. You know, hey, do you have a question? Do you have some? Hey, I heard something you said. I thought that I might share this with you. I love being aligned and keeping up with new products. I really love to help people out and share what I know. So budding engineers and anybody that's like, hey, can I look under the hood? Yeah, dude, I'll send you a show file. Like, yeah, check it out. No problem.
Well, man, thank you so much for your time. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you. And
thanks, Nick.